And now, what compels ordinary people to take extraordinary actions to protect our planet? Every year, the Goldman Environmental Prize recognizes individuals from around the world for their efforts to protect and enhance our natural environment, often at great personal risk. This evening, I'm deeply honored to have two of these heroes with us. First, Laurene Allen. For decades, the St. Gobain Performance Plastics factory had been leaking toxic forever chemicals, we all know about those, into local drinking water in New Hampshire. She stepped up to protect thousands of affected families and organized a campaign that led to the plant's closure. Please welcome Laurene to Climate One.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
Coming us after that fabulously glam evening last night. So you are a clinical social worker whose circumstances compelled you to enter environmental work. But that story begins back when you were a kid at a garage sale. Tell us that story.
Well, I was about 12 years old, quite some time ago, 51 years ago, and I had some change in my pocket, and I saw a book that really pulled to me, and that was Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. I picked that book up for a nickel or so and read it, and it really pulled me in. And as I walked the woods and looked at the streams, I started thinking about what she wrote and how immense this all was.
Wow, 12. That's pretty, and have that calling, the book called to you. And let's talk about Merrimack, New Hampshire. There's a river that runs through it called the Merrimack River, where people get their water. And right on the river was a big processing plant called St. Gobain Performance Plastics. What was happening there? Set the scene.
Well, they acquired from a company called ChemFab, and their claim to fame was this fiberglass-infused fabric that was very light. So the Millennium Dome in London in the year 2000 with this big white ball was what it was. So it's Teflon coated. So they patented this process where you could take fabric, dip it into pans saturated with PFAS forever chemicals, run it up these towers, cook it, and emit through 13 unfiltered air stacks. So the air particulate goes for miles and miles and miles into the soil, leaches into groundwater, into waterways, and just keeps contaminating. Lots of Department of Defense contracts with suits and radome covers and satellite covers, and all of it was bad news to the environment and the humans.
Well, you say that, and remember the film Dark Waters with Mark Ruffalo,
Yes.
and there's a fabulous kind of explainer riff in there where he kind of goes back to World War II. A lot of these forever chemicals were developed because of these properties that you talk about, light and kind of can repel water,
Yes.
et cetera, lots of military applications. So to explain, PFAS stands for a word that I cannot pronounce. Maybe you can. It's a mouthful. They're also known as toxic forever chemicals. So what are they and why are they so bad?
Well, one of the names is perfluorinated alkali substances, and they are Teflon, basically. So the water in oil repellent qualities really create this bond that's very, very hard to break with carbon and fluorine. And they do not break down. They bioaccumulate in the environment. They will be there for 50 lifetimes at least.
So our Gore-Tex jacket's going to be...
Bad news, yeah. So we can do without that, and in your bodies. So when these chemicals get into your bodies, and they're in everyone's bodies at this point, you don't excrete them and they don't break down. So they wreak havoc. They are the most persistent of endocrine disruptors. So the endocrine system is be-all to all of our health systems.
Yeah, I remember in that movie again, like how long the chains are. They're hard to break, which means they're around forever. Hence the forever name. So in New Hampshire, people have a habit of being pretty stoic, pretty unique state, saying we're fine. So what were you seeing and hearing?
Well, the first information meeting in early 2016, it was really a relay of a very minimal area. 2 public water wells, which are groundwater, were closed. They were over the then Federal Health Advisory of 100 parts per trillion, and a handful of private wells. They reported maybe 13 wells. So they were acting like no big deal here. And we started asking about the other public wells, because it isn't a leap to say if groundwater is contaminated and the river is contaminated, all groundwater is contaminated. Mm-hmm. It's not going to respect a 0.5-mile radius. So we pushed, and that was expanding, and still expanding. So all of the public water supplies, all of the private wells in 9 towns at this point are acknowledged.
And why wasn't this caught? If this was so bad, was government sort of falling asleep on the job? What?
Well, we have a broken regulatory system for chemical, rubber stamping in a national level. I've worked on that. And New Hampshire is a very anti-regulatory, hands-off, business-friendly state. Mm-hmm. So this was the perfect state for a company who is not invested. This is a foreign entity that saw the opportunity to make profits. They could cook faster, hotter, and pollute, and really make their shareholders happy, while claiming to be environmental stewards and good neighbors. That was their branding.
And so you were, a clinical social worker at the time. What were you hearing about people's health? Or was this, other than, detection in the wells
Right.
that you mentioned, was it manifesting in people?
Well, people, when we see health issues, we think it's genetics, we think it's lifestyle, we think, sooner or later it's going to catch up to us if we aren't living a healthy life. So there are a lot of people like that. New Englanders are very, very stoic, as you said. When you say, how are you doing? They say they're fine. They do not self-disclose. So at the early informational meeting, instead of coming up to the microphone and asking about, what are you doing about this, and the nuts and bolts, they were disclosing health patterns in their families and in their neighborhoods and what they were seeing. I was stunned to hear that level of self-disclosure. People who were uncomfortable talking about this, but they felt compelled to ask. And at the end, they would say, could it be the water? Which means they were wondering, why is this happening? And there isn't a state anywhere that's going to say, yes, it's the water. I understand that. But they were told, we don't really have any way to connect exposure to outcome. These are emerging contaminants. We know nothing about them. Mm-hmm. And I start Google searching and finding NIH studies and many, many pieces, including the C8 study, which they talk about in Dark Waters. And the science was there. It just wasn't being looked at.
So you co-founded Merrimack Citizens for Clean Water to be a voice for these people. What did you think your odds were as an individual, small number of people going up against a big corporation?
Well, people in town were really furious. They wanted them closed. They didn't lose a day of business. They didn't pay a penny in fines, and it was business as usual. And they really don't have accountability. So people were angry. They knew we had costs coming at us that we didn't cause and we shouldn't be paying for. So as I elevated the health impacts and validated people, they realized there was more to it than was being talked about, and it was a trust issue. In my area, in my town at that point, there were people who were trying to make it very political, and they saw myself as potentially politically motivated, which was really interesting to me.
Well, you're threatening jobs. I mean, there's how many people
Right.
work at this plant, right?
Yeah, 200. Not our biggest employer in the area.
Okay, but still
Yeah.
jobs, and still, did you have people openly hostile towards you? Because I've talked with other Goldman Award winners where,
Yes.
someone
Yep.
shows up in a bar with a gun and says, be careful.
Not necessarily. There's a lot of talk in New Hampshire about the gun swagger types, but they also know that if they act, they're in trouble. They're kind of set up they can have all the guns they want, but when they take action, something will happen. So words, they were using their words as weapon, fear-mongers, crazy ladies. We were called, don't say the word contamination, it's inflammatory language. Lots of that. You can't prove this, don't say that this is what's going on, everybody's fine, I've drank the water, I'm healthy.
Do you ever think about backing off?
No, because I knew it was not right. Something was not right there. The original slides, when it came to the health piece, were minimal. There was a slide that basically said nothing, almost where they're found, and talked about Teflon pans and popcorn bags, which are important. We can do something about that, but didn't address public health and environmental health at all. Those slides had a little logo in the corner of a company called 3M that is one of the original manufacturers of PFAS. And when it hit me after the fact, when I did my own research, I realized, wow, in the community's hour of need, you're showing us slides from 3M. So a lot of our leaders in the town and elected officials were getting information from industry and lobbyists, and they were buying it.
In these situations, the workers, in one sense, have the most to lose because it's their
Yes.
livelihood. On the other hand, they're often the most exposed and at risk.
Right.
So did they slip information to you secretly?
Yes,
or
they
how,
did.
how did that play out?
Yep, I heard stories about things being poured down floor drains and actions initially. Then I heard about health issues, that workers were floor workers, so they were not paid as well as their research and development and management, very well paid on that level. So there are a lot of manufacturing jobs in southern New Hampshire they could have left, but they didn't, and they had health benefits that they felt were extraordinary. So I asked a few workers about that. What do you mean extraordinary? How a health benefit is a health benefit? And I heard the most chilling example I've ever heard. They said, well, this company's treated us so well that my friend who worked here was diagnosed with kidney cancer. Now, kidney cancer is what you're going to see with PFOA, is the top cancer. In our area, 67% higher than statistically significant, 67%. Also, you see this in the C8 study in West Virginia and Parkersburg. So he told me a story of his friend who thought he was very fortunate because his wonderful company said, don't use your health insurance benefits, we'll take care of it. Set him up with kidney dialysis in his home. So off record, and not going through insurance, and really quiet.
So that it wouldn't be reported? Is that what you're saying?
It was a way of, so the workers felt that, oh, look at the special treatment we're getting. They're really taking care of us, and they weren't connecting where the cancers came from. And that was just one story. So for whatever reason, they've worked very hard to create this image, reduce responsibility, and they knew these chemicals were harmful.
So my employer's so nice, they're going to take care of the cancer that their job is giving to me. Okay, I'm trying to understand that. And so you, in your acceptance speech at the Goldman Environmental Prize, you said, quote, I have met people who refuse to be broken. Mm-hmm. Say more about that.
Oh my gosh, that's what's kept me going. In summer of 2017, I was at a conference in Boston, the first PFAS national gathering anywhere with people from across the country. Myself and a few others from other states were asked to come and tell the community perspective of our stories, because it was brand new, and academia and science really knew a lot, and they were trying to lift us up. So there we go, and we tell our stories, and at a working lunch, I realized we're working community at a time, we're working state to state, and we're up against everybody who's in charge, who's way ahead of us in hearing the industry playbook, as they say. So I looked around this table, and I think we were going to be workshopped into some activity, and I had no tolerance for that. I was way ahead. So I basically hijacked the organizer's lunch, and I said, we need to form our own group, and we need to work on federal regulatory. The federal system is broken. Your clean water should not depend on your zip code. If I get my asks and you don't get yours, that's not okay with me. So we talked a little bit about what we're going to call this, and there was founded the National PFAS Contamination Coalition with people in 30 states and our leadership team in 20 states. And these folks are telling stories from the south side of Tucson to Clean Cape Fear in North Carolina, where Chemours makes these poisons. And you're hearing these stories of cancers and illness and people who look, their lifestyle may have been good enough that they look healthy. I look relatively healthy, but what I see happening in my body and what other people seeing happening in their neighbors, in their streets, it breaks you. It's very emotional, and there's a trauma component where you have no validation to this day. Anywhere you look, the health studies have been blocked for humans, and we know what they would show. And, you're not getting that validation of the impacts on yourself, but we know each other so well, better than my closest friends, actually. They know a part of me, people from across this nation, that what it feels like and what you see and how you have to push forward. It really is very, very broken.
So, and the people who are really sick refuse to be broken.
Right.
In an interview with the New Hampshire Bulletin, you said, quote, while this is great news and everyone in town is going to be celebrating big time, it also gives me pause and makes me feel mad and sad and really emotional because I just think about the people. How does this damage persist when it's so human and
Yeah, the attention becomes upon the action, what we accomplish regulatory federal that is at stake, and we hope to hold on to those gains, what we've done as a state that was in the lead before people caught up to us and blocked progress, but we did accomplish a lot. So when you check off that box in terms of policy and regulatory, there's a lot of things that you don't have. You don't have your health support, you don't have health monitoring, you don't have accountability from the polluter. There's so many things. You don't have physician guidance to, help people heal, and early intervention and prevention, and your emotional, support. So there's things that you would get if you were in a natural disaster, right? That you would understand what happened to you and why, and you have to rebuild your whole life. So this is like this invisible tsunami that never ends. And it's not a question of what at times, it's a question of when. There's a progression of disease that I see everywhere, and it's pretty horrifying. So the work never ends. There's so much more to do.
Right, in the system where we have, you can put a market on product until it's proven harmful, rather than in Europe where you have to prove first
yes,
that it's
the precautionary principle.
Precautionary principle. In Europe, you have to prove that it's safe first. At Climate One, we've been talking about the gutting of different federal agencies. We sat down with Gina McCarthy, former EPA administrator, recently, and I encourage you to check out that episode of the podcast if you haven't. She's amazing. Gina McCarthy talking about all the cuts happening at the EPA. Looking ahead, how do you feel about the what do you think about effective strategies to protect public health in these times?
Well, a lot of people are feeling very discouraged. I have some amazing scientists, academic friends that I've met in this journey, a lot of great NGOs, and they're feeling really frightened, and they should be. And they're saying, why aren't you feeling frightened? I said, well, I'm feeling frightened about a lot of other stuff politically right now, but this topic, when I started this journey in New Hampshire, we had 100% 70-something-year-old Republican men who were very tight with New Hampshire Heritage Foundation, Americans for Prosperity, and they did not believe in science in anything like this, and they were there. So I worked in that climate. I also worked for 4 years under the first Trump administration, and there is progress. We made progress. Nothing federally got over the finish line, but a lot of plans were laid out at that time. So I have worked in conditions that are less than ideal in New Hampshire and federally, and I know if we step back and say, 3.5 more years, and then we can get things done again, we can't think like that.
Your governor, Chris Sununu, he passed recently on a Senate bid, thought to have his eyes on the White House. Where's he been in all this?
He is so incorrigible. He has never once addressed the largest contamination investigation in all of New England, not just New Hampshire. Has never come out.
That's this project you're
yes,
talking about.
9 years, right? So he just left office last fall and passed this to Kelly Ayotte. So we're kind of feeling her out right now. And he was over at St. Gobain continually telling the workers that they work for a company that was so wonderful, and the people in the community really don't know what they're talking about. When the federal MCLs were announced, all the jargon, thank you for that. The National Water Standards, which set limits on PFOA and several other PFAS in drinking water for everyone, regardless of your zip code, of any municipality of any size. This is huge and unprecedented.
Clean water standards,
Yes, nationwide. So media tracked me down because they know I'd been working on this with the EPA, and I said all the right things, of course, because I felt them, it was real. They tracked down the governor. They said, so what do you think about this? What does it mean to New Hampshire? This is really great. He said on camera, this is not okay. This is unattainable, unaffordable, and unrealistic. And I remember those 3 words, and I was cursing at the television when I heard that. I couldn't believe it. He has a background supposedly in some environmental work.
Can't afford the clean water standards.
Can't afford, unattainable, unrealistic. In Merrimack, we filter all our water to non-detect. We have attained it. It's realistic, and it's relatively affordable if you work smart and use, the right money.
So you're confident of the clean water you have now. An inspiring part of this story is that you were not an environmental scientist or water quality expert. It kind of brings to mind Erin Brockovich, which I rewatched recently, which is very similar. So what lessons did you learn that were most helpful in your organizing?
I wonder, I'm not saying men can't do this because we have some great men who've stepped up in our community and taken roles on, but women have this quality where if we don't see that somebody's getting it right, we just roll up our sleeves sleeves and say, all right, somebody's got to do this.
That
and
mama
we
bear
jump in,
instinct,
right?
yeah.
We jump in. And I realized after the first year, petitions and, screaming, yelling at people in meetings and saying, you owe us this, do the right thing, and protests, they're important for giving people a voice, but they're not going to solve the problem. You have to become your own expert because no one is coming to save you. And when no one's coming to save you, Mama Bear does step in. I love people, and I can't see people harmed.
Laurene, your story is really inspiring. Thank you for sharing with us. Let's give Laurene another.
Thank you.
Well, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, courage is courageous. So what you're doing is courage is contagious. So we're moving from the Merrimack to the ocean surrounding the Canary Islands, and that's where our next guest, Carlos Mallo Molina, worked as a civil engineer, and then his life took a turn. Please join me in welcoming founder of In Oceana, Carlos Mallo Molina.
The seat is yours.
Tough act to follow, Carlos, but I think you're up to it. We found a picture of you from about 10 years ago when you were a civil engineer. You were building roads to the Fonsalía Port, and later you would work to stop construction of that port. What was your work like back then, and how did it lead you into the ocean?
Yeah, when I see this picture, I still think, is that me? Yeah, I was born by the ocean in the north of Spain, and my dad was a civil engineer who was building ports. So I was always by the sea, and I learned how to love it, and especially because I agree that women are better in conservation than men, and I've been fully supported by incredible women. So I think from when I was a kid, I was just loving the ocean so much.
And then you became an engineer, and you were building some roads leading to this port. And then what happened? Yeah,
I think a lot of things happened, but I remember some of them. Like when I was working in Tenerife, and this highway was on top of the mountain. So going up to El Teide, that is the biggest mountain in Spain. It's a volcano, but it's like the highest of all Spain. So I can see the whole ocean there, and sometimes you can see the whales jumping, and sometimes you just see this blue ocean, or sometimes the sunsets. And I was thinking like, wow, so I'm building this road, and at the end of this road, there is going to be a massive port with cruises, ferries, 400 recreational boats that are potentially going to damage all of this environment and all of this amazing area. And that was probably the biggest.
And then so that was in Spain where you're working, and then you went to, I believe you went scuba diving somewhere and had kind of a change.
Yeah. In Spain, I was scuba. I've been scuba diving since I was a kid. It's what makes me keep going. I think being underwater and
calms you and soothes your soul.
Oh yeah, all the stress goes away, all the problems go away, and I'm myself again. So, but I remember this trip when I was in this kind of dilemma of what I'm doing with my life, that I went to Thailand, and I learned, I discovered what is marine conservation, because I never really, in Spain, marine conservation hasn't been a thing. It's still starting. And I met this amazing group of people doing marine conservation in a conservation center. And they brought me to the ocean, and they were like, wow, you know a lot of things, the engineering, we can do things together. And I have this moment that I saw my first whale shark that I never saw in my life. And that whale shark was surrounded by plastic everywhere. So it was kind of an oxymoronic situation that I was like, this is so wrong. And I think that was the click when I decided I was going to quit my job.
And did you think that as an engineer until that point that you were doing harm?
I learned that I was doing harm. Yeah, I remember like when I was checking all of the designs and all of the construction and basically all of the numbers, like engineers put a lot of effort on the structures and like security, but when it comes to health and safety was growing at that time, so I'm happy that that's better. But when it comes to environment, many times, like my bosses were like, well, don't worry too much about the environmental part. We need to open the road, or like, so it was not prioritized.
Sure. And how your dad was an engineer, and then you go to Thailand, you have this kind of life change of heart. You decide not to be an engineer. How did that go over with Dad?
Very bad. My dad was totally shocked. He didn't understand what was marine conservation. He doesn't understand still what is marine conservation. Unfortunately, my dad now is his brain is not there, but he was struggling a lot to understand why you are going to ruin such a successful career as a civil engineer to be a missionary, to be like trying to do something that doesn't make any sense. So, but my mother was there.
Okay, got one out of the two. So in 2021, you basically ran a global campaign to raise awareness about the impact of the Fonsalía Port on the ocean's ecosystem in the Canary Islands, which is off the coast of Morocco, south of Spain. So tell us about what motivated you to set up that campaign.
Yeah, and for you to understand the Canary Islands better, because for sure some of you maybe don't know, is the Spanish or the European Hawaii. That's how I explain to people, because it's actually kind of that. So when this Fonsalía Port was starting to be like, okay, the government wanted to build it, we came together a lot of people from different backgrounds and started creating this campaign called Salvar Fonsalía, so Save Fonsalía. And it was amazing because, well, I guess my special role there is that I was a civil engineer, or ingeniero de caminos, canales y puertos, that goes against a port. And that was kind of the first time that happened and was shocking. And many politicians were like, are you sure you are doing, like, what are you doing? They're like, you have a huge career, you can be making so much money. And but I was like, yeah, but no, I want to protect this place. And so I joined a lot of biologists, storytellers, scientists, conservationists, and we together like created a huge campaign.
Right, and then, so big campaign. And so what role did climate science and the climate crisis play in that campaign, kind of opposing this port and the sort of Hawaii of Europe?
Yeah, so to explain you that, we need to come back to 2016, when the government actually built a massive port in the east side of the island. This port was called Granadilla. The government says was going to create thousands of of employees, and it was going to really bring a lot of wealth to the island. That port was finished in 2017, 18, and is there without any use since then. It's abandoned. It's doing nothing.
So we'd call that a white elephant. Lots of money that didn't do what it was supposed to do.
And destroyed all the seagrass and destroyed so much. Like it was really bad. So I guess the opportunity was that we have that example, and COVID happened. When COVID happened, everybody was at home, and everybody was understanding, wow, how much we need nature. Nobody wanted to be home. Everyone wanted to be on the beach or going to the mountains. So people started creating that, maybe being more sensitive.
Awareness, yeah.
More awareness. So all of that helped, but also the climate emergency, it was declared in Europe. So it was like we are in the middle of a crisis of climate. So there was a lot of things happening that supported this movement to be successful.
Right, so some timing, some awareness connection with nature. What kind of opposition did you get from your former, I understand your parents were split, but what kind of opposition did you get from your former colleagues, civil engineers? You kind of left the tribe and now you're doing this crazy stuff.
None of them, well, most of them didn't understand what I was doing. Uh-huh. And then years after, I brought them scuba diving, and they started to understand. So, but it was hard because I was like quitting my job. I was just receiving a big award in innovation in construction in England, because at that time I went to England to work. And when I quit, my boss was like, "Are you crazy? Like, what happened? Did you hit your head or what?" So yeah, it was a lot of opposition. And when I went actually against the port, some of my ex-colleagues were sending me like messages saying, "Hey, what you are doing is wrong. You are going to kill the employees in this island. We are already struggling here." And yeah, it was bad.
Right, because people think of trade. There was a lot of trade disruption during COVID, right? People understand supply chains. You wouldn't need to get those. People probably didn't even think about supply chains, but during COVID, they're like, "Oh, these things are important. Ports are a big part of that," and you're potentially threatening that. So you went around sort of politician by politician. What case did you make? Was it a moral case, ecological case, business case? What was your campaign?
Like my part of the campaign was, of course, to prove that there was another solution, that the port was not necessarily from the technical point of view, and also support the environmental impact that was going to be huge. But of course, there were some scientists, because when the politicians were, okay, what whales there are here, they have the data. We have a population of pilot whales, over 300 of them living here all year. So, but I think what I think we used a lot, it was speaking to the politicians and saying, what is the island you want in the future? Like, you want this island to be like like dead, no marine mammals, like no the ocean really destroyed. So what are you going to show to the tourism that want to see the sea turtles if you don't have sea turtles? Mm-hmm. So that helped the politicians to understand that this was also a business case to save the economy of the island through tourism.
Right, because if you kill all that stuff, then what's the economy going to be based on? You know, a lot of people start nonprofits around marine conservation, but it's really difficult to keep them afloat, so to speak. Was there a moment when you thought that, like, oh, I don't know if I can keep this alive or keep going?
Every year. It still is hard. So actually, Spain is even harder because, as I said, like Spain doesn't still understand what marine conservation is. It's starting to be a thing, but very, very starting. So to me, my strategy was also to open the 501c3 here in the US and try to meet amazing people that I was so lucky. And there is a woman in this room that has been incredibly supportive to this organization. So finding these amazing people in the US that supports the mission of my organization has been key.
And right now, environmentalists in this country are really scared because they think their targets, their nonprofit status could be challenged, their funding is insecure, and that fear is part of the point, to make people afraid, to either distract them, to have them lawyer up and hire lawyers. So how do you think you're going to need to adapt in the future? And particularly there's talk about targeting organizations that transfer funds in or out of the United States, so that would target you. Who fundraises in the United States. I think you have a nonprofit based here, right? So how's that future looking? How are you going to adapt?
It's like, I feel I've been metaphorically, I've been in the jungle from the beginning. Like, you know, when the organization was at year 2 and we were starting having some traction, doing expeditions and having people coming and donating to do an expedition, COVID happened and we couldn't do expeditions. So it's like, I feel I've been in a challenge after challenge, that this is just one more. I think it's going to be fine. And in this country, there is amazing people like you, like Mike, like Laurene. So like Thea and like other people that I love so much in this country, that you together will win this fight for sure.
So you've had this big moment. What do your colleagues and family members think of you now?
Well, they are all applauding me and saying that what I'm doing is amazing, of course. Yeah. And I don't judge them. I think they were right. They were trying to protect me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you proved them wrong, make them proud. Let's give a round to Carlos. Again. If you haven't, I encourage you to go onto the Goldman Prize website and just look at Laurene and Carlos where they're holding their prizes up. It's just such a beautiful, proud moment. So now you've accepted the Goldman Environmental Prize, and you're here in San Francisco with cameras and microphones and a big celebration. This is your moment of fame, catapulted into fame. And fame is fleeting. So I'm curious how you're processing this moment. Laurene, we can start with you, and experiencing right now. You're kind of at the end of this, like, you describe it, you're living it. Yeah.
Well, what Carlos said resounded with me when he said, we face obstacles, so we know them. But there's also good things that happen on this journey, amazing things. This one is like no other I could ever imagine. And so it happens, and it's a chapter. But the book is a forever book. This book never ends. You know, what our roles are that we've taken on and what we feel that we must do and what you've walked away from, what I've sacrificed career-wise, I relate to that. And, you know, this is an immense platform, I think, to bring visibility to this issue. I don't think it's about, yes, it's about celebrating us and our victories, but to me, that isn't it. It's being able to utilize this visibility to further help people understand that it is up to us. It is up to all of us. We can't just feel depleted and defeated. We can do amazing things. The people will get it right.
And And Laurene, sometimes environmentalists are criticized for like being against everything. Stop, stop, stop.
Yes.
No, no, no. You stopped a closed down a plant, which is good for the people that are working. Well, maybe debate whether it's working. The people who are breathing that air, and that plastic's going to get made somewhere else in someone else's community. So you think that it's kind of like whack-a-mole? Stop.
Of course it's whack-a-mole. It always is, and that's our job, to keep chasing, because workers that aren't protected from what they should be protected, communities that are unaware, that are vulnerable, and I've heard that they will move some productions to places like Mexico or even Ireland. Not sure why Ireland didn't have time to look into that. Plenty of things to do, and but I will watch them, and wherever they go, I will get in touch. We can, through electronics today, get in touch with anyone in any walks of the woods and the whole planet, anyone. So wherever they go, I will contact residents in those areas and find out what's going on and help them be a step ahead. Forever. Forever.
Carlos, fame and attention can protect and boost you. It can also mark you as a target. And standing up for environment can be dangerous these days. And are you thinking about your work differently as a result?
I have my mom here, so I don't know what to say. Yeah, I guess that's not something I'm thinking about. I think is I love the ocean, and I'm just gonna go for it.
And just think about, that's great. Don't let them scare you, etc. At this point, Laurene, you spent a lot of time around Goldman Prize winners, current and previous. Is there a lesson you've learned listening to other stories about you're going to take with you and carry forward? Oh,
absolutely. We had a brunch all together today, and just sitting with each other, meeting for the first time. All of the people of this year's recipients, we do different things and we have different journeys, but we recognize something in each other. And it's really good to know that people are out there who think like you think and apply it in different ways. You need those folks because you cannot feel alone. It's not good for your mental health. And together, hearing that confidence and that ability that, as they say, it's not, this massive race, it's a slower walk. And it's really wonderful to know that people are there. They have a wealth of experience and what they've done and what it's been since receiving the prize. And we know we're joining a family, and it's absolutely wonderful.
How about you, Carlos? What have you learned from being kind of welcomed into this community of heroes, really?
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a dream. I don't believe it yet.
Yeah.
No, it's been amazing, as Laurene says. I think there is so much passion across all of this. And I knew about the Goldman Prize because ex-Goldman Prize winner from Costa Rica that I've been following. He was my idol for a long time. He also helped me in Costa Rica to open a marine conservation center. This is Randall Arauz, and I was having breakfast this morning. But I was actually scuba diving with him on Monday. So it's amazing because also, thanks to this, now I can travel to more places.
Fabulous. Well, you're so inspiring, and I want to include the audience questions. A few minutes for audience questions. Would the following people please come to the microphone in this order? PJ and Ken. I invite you, PJ and Ken, come to the microphone, and please present your question for Laurene and Carlos. First, PJ.
First, I'd like to thank you all both for being here today. As an educator, I use your stories to inspire my students. This question is for Laurene. How many people worked with you to bring down the corporation, and how do you explain such a shocking, widespread chemical to communities? How do you get them to wrap their head around the magnitude of the problem? especially with PFAS?
Yes. Well, what happened in the beginning, how we built our leadership team in my group, is I recognized that at meetings and on Facebook in our community groups, there were certain people who were really angry, and there was other people who were really making sense. They had the right thoughts, but no really plan there. So I have a background, I'm a social worker, I'm a clinical social worker, and I also have done some macro work many years ago. I'm a systemic thinker. So I started thinking of what I learned many years ago in graduate school as the community as my client, and how to build consensus and a sense of what is the problem, do we agree on the problem, and how are we going to work smart and educate the community and bring resources so whatever we say we can back up and we can show the knowledge that we are not supposed to have. And you know that as an educator, knowledge is key. So that was number one. And number two, you raise a good point. A lot of people in the National Coalition, I do a lot of work helping some of my peers there help support each other in their communities, because people are fearful of losses and deaths. And there's people who started this journey with me across the nation who are no longer with us. They've passed away of horrific cancers that they should not have ever had. So this idea of sitting with a person, and people need validation. They need to tell their story. And this is the power, if anybody's ever been to a therapist and you walk in, and if you have the right person, at the end of that first session, you feel better, but nothing has really changed and they haven't really done anything yet. It's that relational place, that therapeutic holding place. So I didn't realize at the time that I do a lot of work with trauma and complex family, and that, interestingly enough, has really helped hold all of that, and people feel like they're seen and heard, and validation is what's been missing from this journey. So that's why.
Thank you. Ken.
Good evening, Laurene and Carlos. I just want to thank you for all you've done, and congratulations for winning the award. It was well deserved. So what I was wondering was, could you both characterize more, what was the nature of the opposition to your work? Was it severe? Was it moderate? Did anybody try to sue you? Was there any threats? I hate to say. I was just wondering, what was going on when you were doing it, and because it sounded like there was a lot of opposition, angry people. But yeah, if you could characterize it a little bit more, I'm just wondering. Thanks.
Carlos.
Yeah. So it was in different stages. Like one of them was when we went again the port. We have some fundings coming from the area, like from the city council, and we were having some let's call it federal fundings. And like what is happening in this country, they just cut it straight away. Like, okay, you're going against me, I go against you. And then it was. I guess the industry in the island was very concerned, because the idea of stop development is scary, because we've been doing that for the last 30 years. So having this group of people saying, no, not to a port, we are not going to build anything, we need to respect this area because we need to protect the area and save the animals, many people were like, well, that's wrong. But again, I think having this incredible platform called Salvar Fonsalía was like the key to fight and to stop the port from happening.
Laurene, opposition?
So in the beginning of this, I know my demographic in New Hampshire, they're very old school, dinosaurs, failure to evolve, all that stuff, and those are the people in charge, unfortunately. So what I knew in the beginning is I could not be branded as an activist, or I would be targeted. So I became a community advocate. I became that person who said, you're saying that you don't have the resources and you don't have the information. Let me reach out to academics and scientists and get that information and help support my community. So that was really low key and friendly, but they still really tried to silence me every way. They shut down our biggest community Facebook group because people were getting information from me there. Tried to say you didn't have to come to public meetings, you could just email us. Threats in words, but it was words, and that was about it. But silencing, discrediting, and claiming my work was only for political gain. That sells pretty well in New Hampshire, and people think politics is a sport in my state. And I danced around that, and I stuck to it over, this affects us all. It isn't a political issue for me, it's a human issue. So I was able to handle that. In my office, there's a lot of conflict that comes into my office, so I think my brain would switch into that mode, and it became not personal, but almost therapeutic intervention, if you will. So it was there, though, the silencing and the name-calling and the bullying. and the intimidating.
So as we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you in this moment when we're gathering to celebrate your courage and triumph, what lessons you would have for people who want to have an impact, who are maybe a little afraid, not sure where to fit in, I don't know if I have enough power, et cetera. Carlos, what's your advice on people who want to follow in your path? You know, it's hard to follow in your path, but yeah, what's your advice for people who want to get engaged?
When I get this question, I always say, like, listen to your inner child. And if your inner child look at you and is sad, that's a bad symptom. Like, that's a bad indicator. I think if you wake up every morning and you are like, I am empty, I'm not happy what I'm doing, do something to change it, because everybody has a passion inside.
Did you feel empty when you were waking up?
100%.
Okay.
I was so empty, and my mom can give credit to that. Like, I was really so empty. I was like, what I'm doing is not making me happy. So what's the point of living like that? And I think a lot of people, especially in big cities, are like feeling that way. I think big cities are separating us from the nature. And so yeah, look at your inner child, and if he's happy with you, you are in the right path.
And if you're not, change it.
Change it and jump, and it's okay, because in this, I mean, especially the people living in the societies we live, like the developed countries, we can come back to whatever we were before. We're not going to lose much.
You could, if you failed, you could have gone back to being an engineer or something. Yeah, Laurene, how about you in terms of finding that inner guidance or inspiration for people who are trying to seek their path?
You know, go outside. I would be too scared to scuba dive. But walking the ocean in the winter, when I have a tough week, I head for the coast, I walk. The ocean is there for us, and we know that. So you have to go outside and you have to feel it. But when you see something that's wrong, you know, listen to your conscience and say, who else feels my way? You need to find like-minded people. You need to connect. You need to see if there are groups in your state or community groups that are out there that you can work together with. You know, work smart and work with people. Don't be alone with your truths.
You are inspiring. I've interviewed a lot of people. You are really inspiring. So Laurene and Carlos, thank you for your courage and for your work. And thank you for...
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. What a great show.
Thank you.
Okay.
For 35 years, the Goldman Environmental Prize has been awarded to heroes like Laurene and Carlos. Everyone is a single inspiration. I'm also proud that Mr. Goldman was one of the first funders of Climate One. I went into his office, had this, look in those eyes, and he was one of the first supporters of my work. I'm grateful. And I'm grateful to them, and the world is grateful to both the prize winners for the work they do and for the foundation for elevating their voices. Here to talk a little more about this work is Executive Director Mike Sutton. Please welcome.
Thank you so much. Turn that on. Yes? Thank you so much for having us and for having the Goldman Prize winners here, Greg and Climate One. And thank you all for being here. Laurene and Carlos, their inspiration, the 5 colleagues that joined them, bring our total in 36 years to 226 Goldman Prize winners across 95 countries. And they all inspire us. And by the way, to Laurene's point earlier, in the last decade, 80% of Goldman Prize winners have been women. Believe it or not. We are grateful for everything they do. They inspire us. The Goldman Prize winners work on a wide range of issues, as you've seen, from ocean conservation to pollution to mining, oil and gas drilling, leaving it in the ground, creating new protected areas across the world, huge marine protected areas, protecting the Amazon, preventing deforestation. About 40% of Goldman Prize winners over the past 36 years have worked on what we think of as climate action of one sort or another. That is to say, if you take the definition from the recent book by Paul Hawken, Drawdown, there's a wide variety of things that qualify as climate action, and our Goldman Prize winners are involved in nearly every one of those things. When in these trying times, in these challenging times in the United States and elsewhere, we need grassroots activism more than ever. and that's what Goldman Prize winners bring to us. They also bring to us something more intangible, but not any less important, and that is a sense of hope and inspiration that we all need to carry on. I hope many of you were able to attend the Goldman Prize ceremony yesterday here at the Opera House. We filled every single seat in that Opera House for the first time since the pandemic. And it's because we all need that inspiration and hope to carry on the fight. Goldman Prize winners give us that. Thank you, Laurene. Thank you, Carlos. And thank all of your cohort this year for helping us carry on. And again, thank you, Climate One, for having us here.
Thank you, Mike. So thanks for coming. Being together is powerful and needed right now, especially in this time, with a lot of anxiety and fear. Everyone's feeling it. So I hope you can join us in the reception out there and connect with people, look them in the eye, be together, and let's celebrate these heroes and being together out there. We'll see you soon out there. Thank you for coming.